Hey there, guys, and welcome back to Utility Sports. If you do enjoy MLB content, this is the place to be. Now, let's get into the news. Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco have been dealt to the New York Mets for Amed Rosario, Andres Jimenez, Josh Wolf, Isaiah Green. And looking at this package as a whole, what did the New York Mets get in Lindor? Obviously, they're getting a top tier shortstop in the MLB, arguably a top 10 player in the entire world at this point in his career. A little bit of a down year last year. He had 258, 8 home runs, 27 RBIs, 333 OBP, and 415 slugging. So, kind of a down year by his standards. Obviously, it was a weird season. That's not going to be the trend moving forward. His career is not trajecting down. It's only, continuing to rise at this point. But this is a really great deal for the Mets because they only give up Josh Wolf, who's the ninth best prospect in their entire organization. They give up Isaiah Green, who's their 10th best prospect in the entire organization. Obviously, Amed Rosario is in the deal because they have Francisco Lindor now at that shortstop spot. So at that point, you do not need Amed Rosario, who's a nice young player, but overall, I mean, he doesn't even hold a candle to the abilities of Francisco Lindor at this point. And we look at Jimenez, another shortstop or young player at this point in his career, where they feel comfortable enough to move him because they're getting a guy like Francisco Lindor. Obviously, Carlos Carrasco has been dealing with a lot of things in his life outside of baseball, but him coming to the Mets, this is a good opportunity to kind of revitalize his career at this point. I'm really excited about this deal for the Mets for that reason. The Steve Cohen era has officially started with a bang. This is a humongous trade for the New York Mets. And looking at it from the Cleveland Indians standpoint, I think this isn't not a great deal for them as a whole. Obviously, you get the ninth and 10th best prospects in the Mets organization, but I let's kind of run through the prospects that they got. Josh Josh Wolf is a starting pitcher that can hit 97 miles per hour. On average, though, you're going to see him around that 94 during the course of a game. He does have the ability to hit 97, but we're going to see streamline 94. Isaiah Green is kind of a toolsy outfielder, but his greatest tool is speed. He's had some issues hitting the ball, and scouts have said that his swing is a little flat at this point in his career. So they got to kind of work out the bat situation, but from a speed standpoint, he is a top tier prospect in that regard. Looking at Amed Rosario, he had 252 last year, 4 homers, 15 RBIs, and he does average about 22 stolen bases in the full years that he plays. So, a little more speed. If you look at what the Indians are trying to do in this, they're just gathering more speed, more athleticism to the team as a whole. It's going to be hard to replace Lindor's production, but I think they felt like they weren't going to get that long-term deal done at this rate that they were going at. So this move makes a ton of sense to pull right now, but it's really hard because you don't ever want to move a player like Francisco Lindor and what he brings to the table, right? It's really not it's not replaceable at this point. Just considering that he is a top tier player in the MLB, you can argue a top 10, top 15 player in the entire league for sure. And then, the Jimenez, 263, 3 home runs last year for the Mets in obviously, once again, a shortened season. So a lot of different things could happen with this deal, but I really do see the Mets as coming out on top of this deal for sure. This is an A+ move in my opinion. I'm not going to really, sway on this opinion as I, kind of let it sink in as the news happened. But for the Mets, this is humongous news. But looking at it from the Cleveland perspective, I'm not super pumped about what they got back. I really wish they could have netted. I think he's worthy of 2 top 5 prospects in their system. But at this point, it is what it is. And it's unfortunate that Lindor did not have a phenomenal season last year to really keep that value up in terms of the trade market. But this is just a weird year in the pandemic year because teams are starting to cut back on payroll. Obviously, there's going to be a few teams, the bigger market teams, that are really going to look to take advantage during this offseason, considering some teams are trying to get off money And obviously, the Mets are not doing that by signing James McCann, and now they're trading for Francisco Lindor. And hopefully, the Mets can get this long-term deal in place. That was part of the leverage that the Mets did have in this, is saying we do not have him long-term yet, so we can't give up, you know, the maximum value that it would take to get a guy like Francisco Lindor, considering that long-term deal was not in place when the trade was made. So I think that the Mets are going to move very quickly in the process of trying to get him re-signed. Obviously, I think this is kind of like the Mookie Betts situation where they went into the trade knowing that it was going to be tough to keep a guy like Mookie around. Obviously, Mookie got acclimated to the Dodgers. I think that this is kind of that same pathway that they are going to have here with Francisco Lindor. Obviously, they did give up a couple of top 10 prospects, but at this point, I think this is a huge W for the New York Mets. And now in the NL East, you're going to see kind of a power struggle, right? We have the Atlanta Braves sitting at the very top of it. I see the Mets coming in second still. Atlanta's just such a good roster as a whole. I don't think that the Mets could overcome them in the NL East. I think it's definitely going to be tighter. I definitely do think that, but I like Atlanta's roster as a whole. Obviously, Miami, a surprising playoff berth last year, ended up knocking off the Cubs in the wild card round. So they're always going to be in the mix in this. We have the Washington Nationals as well, a team that will be a little better than they were this season. And we have the Philadelphia Phillies, who are still trying to make a decision on JT Realmuto. So looking at this division as a whole, I think that the Mets really propelled themselves into the number 2 spot in this division with this A-plus worthy move. I love this for the Mets as a whole. I think that you're buying somewhat low on a superstar. So whenever you can do that, the important thing for the Mets is, can we get him signed to a long-term deal? I think that's very possible at this point. I think he's going to be motivated to stay in New York. Obviously it's a big market. I really enjoy, watching Lindor play. He's a magician with his glove. He's phenomenal with the bat. At this point, we have to really consider the Mets big winners in the early stages of this trade. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Do not forget to subscribe if you do enjoy our content. Also, leave a like if you did enjoy what you saw in this video. And we cannot wait to see you guys in our very next one.